Low, 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 low. Coming in from the void, from beyond. Actually, I'm in a Honda Accord that we have parked on the property. It has nice, comfortable cheers and good sound dampening, so I don't have to yell or worry about, you know, any random noises disturbing the stream. Although that does add to the background noise, you know, if free uh, the background noise that you get from just things happening around you. But let's see what happens. See what happens. This Honda Accord has been parked here for 3, 4 years maybe, and it's a good, reliable car if you've ever had one. Back when things were made reliable. um, and it's not that this car didn't function or anything. This car ran, you know, like it was supposed to. It's what, a just bigger, beefier version of somewhat slightly luxurious version of the Honda Civic, which we also have. And it's not that this car ran. We started it up. You drive it out the property, you drive it around. It's just that it wouldn't pass emissions. And it's the regulations that destroy everything. Okay, yeah, maybe this thing was throwing smoke out of its tailpipe. It did have what seemed like low compression, but that didn't stop it from driving. That didn't stop it from functioning. And I say it's even more of a environmental impact if you don't drive it and get the last remaining few years out of it. But that's just my opinion. I'll talk ad nauseum about the regulators and how they just ruin everything for what they think most likely is a good cause. But if you really dig deep into it, the regulators are controlled by even deeper pockets. But that's a topic for another day. Today's topic, at least for this video, I want to talk about risk aversion, especially in the new generation. So, back in the day, the story, our ancestors of the boomers, of the Gen Xers would tell us that there was a time where children would walk home alone. They were calling latchkey kids. And if you go back to the boomers, they would tell us that they used to not only walk home alone, but they used to walk uphill both ways and fight, snow wolves and all kinds of crazy stuff from their little house on the prairie. And maybe they did, but I'm certain that most of them didn't. But the risk aversion has permeated into the culture of people that would normally be willing to take a risk. The people that would normally become soldiers, the people that would normally go out and do things that you wouldn't do as a fully grown adult with responsibilities. And I talked about a little bit about this in my previous video about banking. I think it's going to be my previous video. I'm not sure when I'm going to post this. But we need risk takers. But when you structure everything to a matriarchy, matriarchs don't take risk. Everything with a matriarchy has to be basically like the Borg. Everybody has to sound the same. Everybody has to look the same way, or you get ostracized and tossed out of the group. And getting tossed out of the group ever since the beginning of caveman times meant that you receive less resources and you could possibly die, or at the very least not pass on your lineage, your genetics. And that holds true today. And the dynamics that play out between people, as we have less risk takers in society, and the society has conformed around the non-risk takers. And why is it so? Why do we have less risk takers? Well, we have this thing called the internet at our fingertips, and we can see the previous mistakes of people on full display that didn't make it but took a risk. But in all honesty, we wouldn't be here in the United States. We wouldn't be here as people. We wouldn't be alive if nobody took a risk. And risk aversion, people being risk averse because they've been pushed into it by a culture of risk aversity. They've been pushed into it because it's comfortable. They've been pushed into it because people are being educated, quote unquote, beyond the normal standard. And hate to say it, but less educated and more rural people tend to have more children. They tend to take more risks. They tend to know that some of those children might not survive. At least some of the older African tribes that haven't integrated into the new systems know that at some point your child, one of the 10 of them might become lion food, tiger food. They might die of a disease. And they have a lot of children just to offset that, possibility. But if you live in the United States, you live in the West, we generally don't have life-threatening type of consequences to, life. We'll have things that will mentally scar you. We have things that will physically hurt you, but leave you alive. But we generally don't just go off, ending people's lives, because that gets you thrown in jail. It gets you thrown in jail longer, I should say. And in some states, that gets you thrown in jail less. How they say it, not alive men tell no tales. But if there is a body, there is a crime. There is a case. Somewhere between that. It depends on your regulations. Once again, I'm talking about those regulations. But speaking of those regulations, that's part of the risk aversity. We've been regulated into just not taking risks. But it seems like today the only people that, I should say not people, but the only groups of people that can take risks are large corporations. You don't see people pining to go and battle space radiation by launching themselves into the upper atmosphere, trying to get a spacewalk going. Nobody dreams of that. Nobody dreams of, pushing a pushing a vehicle past, a certain miles per hour. Have you ever heard? When's the last time you heard somebody wanting to go the speed of sound in a car? Now it's been done. Utah Salt Flats, look it up. But not many people are trying to build a car that does 600 miles an hour. That's not a dream. Because, well, we know what happens to people that do that. We know what happens to people that are in that vehicle on ground that, are doing 600 miles an hour. Not to mention it's not practical. So, for the sake of risk aversity, you wouldn't try to do that. For the sake of not making a profit, in fact, losing money, you wouldn't do that. But the risk averse are the people that don't start businesses, really. They don't start businesses. They don't produce anything of variety. And as humans, us pattern realizers, or how is it? We like diversity. If we were to do the same thing day in and day out like a robot, it would drive most of us nuts. It would drive a lot of us to what was the definition of insanity. And insanity is just a close cousin of crazy. And crazy people would normally get sent to some kind of psychiatric hospital that we used to call crazy houses. But apparently the regulators got rid of the crazy houses. We no longer have those. And now we're here. People not taking risk. People not having children. People not building businesses. People seeing the risk, doing the calculations because they're smart, they're educated, they went through college, and going, no, that most likely won't benefit me. That most likely won't pan out as something that long term would get me into a position where I can prosper. I can live a comfortable life. This is what everybody wants. I mean, everybody wants to live a somewhat comfortable life where you can take risks without actually being in a position that being in a bad position puts you in a spot of destitute. But being risk averse is a sucky place to be, because not taking risks leaves you stunted. It doesn't let you make it to the next point in life where you become an adult. Becoming an adult for most people requires taking risk. And as many people have said, the people of America are stuck in perpetual adolescence because we're smart. We're not risk takers. We're risk averse. And we don't like pain. We don't like doing the hard things because, frankly, we don't have to. At least most of us don't have to, at least on the surface. But that's all changing. That's all changing. Eventually, we're going to have to take the risks. We're going to have to do the hard things. And it's going to suck. And most of us will not make it. some of us that don't make it will recover, some of us won't recover, and that's just life, unfortunately. It sucks. But at the end of all, there has to be some risk. Otherwise, things just won't progress. Now, if this is giving you any food for thought, you feel like taking a risk on something, maybe, I don't know, throwing $100 into the lottery, maybe starting a business, maybe asking that girl out, maybe asking that guy out, you know, to a coffee date or something. You know, maybe just something as simple as trying an ideal you had stuck in the back of your mind for so long, but everybody said it was too stupid to actually work. But you know that it might work. Leave a comment, subscribe, maybe leave a like, some kind of engagement on the post, but definitely a comment describing what you would do if you could take a risk and try something and recover from it. Maybe your family will help you. Maybe, you know, it wasn't that bad of a risk where you would go into debt. Maybe, you know, it was something you wanted to do since a child, and maybe it works out. Who knows? You know, just leave some comments or something. And I'll be in this void, tossing out ideals once again into the next one.